Hello everyone and welcome to this course on Pathways for a Sustainable World. We are in the second part focused on the space of solutions, and this one relates to the educational system and how we learn to take care of ourselves, others and the planet. So if you haven't seen the other videos dedicated to the space of problems and the different dimensions of the space of solutions, I invite you to do so. It's probably easier to grasp certain aspects of this one when you've seen the others. But to get straight to the point, learning to take care of oneself, others and the planet, what is behind this phrase? To build a sustainable and desirable future, we all need to learn to, and here you put the verb you want. And if we ask people to put a verb, they will put many different verbs. And if we ask institutions or countries to put verbs, they will put many different things. And I invite you, for example, to look at this list of verbs, which is representative of a collective effort. It shows that there are multiple dimensions in what we would like to be able to learn. And if we group them, it roughly corresponds to three main categories. The first one is about personal development, how we become better individuals. The second one is about how we live together, citizenship. And the third one is about how we contribute to the transformation of the world. Since this time we are focusing on the topic of transformation, which in today's world could be called professional life, or how to find one's place in the world today. These three major groups are not arbitrary. They reflect the school's three fundamental responsibilities established from the very beginning. These responsibilities are partly complementary, but can also be sometimes incompatible. Personal development, collective development or citizenship, and professional integration. And from this point of view, it is indeed very interesting to see that if we ask the question of what we really need to learn, we have two different things as well. On one hand, there is what we need to learn to have a desirable and sustainable future. And on the other hand, there is the question of what the school should be responsible for. And if we think on two different levels, it might be a bit easier, perhaps more effectively, to address this question. I will give you two specific examples of models that are commonly used with some of these verbs, and two different models as well. There is one that is used in Canada, where the focus is on living together and on the mental health and well-being of people. This model integrates three key components: resilience, activity and fulfillment. Essential for fostering healthy relationships, it aims to enhance mental health, overall well-being and harmonious living together. This is an example from the work of Patrick Carney. We have both problem-solving abilities, analytical skills, skills and the ability to live a healthy and balanced life, and then skills related to pleasure, satisfaction, achievement and personal fulfillment. This is one model. I'll give you another one. Which is the one proposed by UNESCO to equip oneself with the necessary skills to transform the world. That is, to be an actor in sustainable development. So there has been significant evolution on this subject over the past 20 years. Education for Sustainable Development 2 decades ago was essentially about how to learn the necessary knowledge to properly understand the issues. And today, it is a much more comprehensive theoretical framework, which is not just about knowledge, but also about the skills that need to be developed so that everyone can engage in a complex, uncertain world and thus contribute to the transformation of these structures. Once again, if you have seen the other episodes, you know exactly what I am talking about. If not, I invite you to do so. So we are really in a transformation, a paradigm shift, meaning that the school must take on a new role, or at least reconsider how it has been handling its roles. And then we have various different points of view and perspectives depending on the specific priorities and goals that will be set. I try to summarize that here, and then we'll get to the heart of the matter to have some framing elements, basically. The key skills of the citizens of the planet of tomorrow will again depend on the country, but we fundamentally have three major groups. There is one that revolves around becoming a better person, which is the relationship with oneself, knowing oneself, so it involves skills like self-knowledge, self-esteem, and reflexivity. There is another one that will relate to living together, how we live together, how we develop relationships with others, how we learn to understand others, to cooperate. And here we have skills like empathy, learning, cooperation, and conflict resolution. A third component focuses on understanding the world and its evolution, emphasizing how we can act to improve it. This involves learning to develop our capacity for action. It is called agency or empowerment in English. We don't really have a word for it in French, maybe agentivité. It's essentially the ability to act on the world. There are a whole host of sub-skills that are well listed in the UNESCO report, such as comprehending the world and its possible futures, understanding the rules of the game, how it is organized, understanding how structures, the system and norms work, but also, of course, developing creativity and the ability to solve problems, which combined with collaboration among team members allows for effective problem solving together, which is considered one of the most important and critical skills, for example, for organizations like the OECD. So we have three main groups in total, and from now on I will present you with some different, various and specific examples. Quite exceptional initiatives and projects around the world which relate to some or all of these various different blocks, and we will look at them block by block. I will start with some observations, that is a quick overview of the state of education in the world with its major challenges, and there are plenty of them. And then we will look at what has not been mentioned so far but is still very important, at least in the lower grades, learning the fundamental skills, reading, counting, writing, and then some add emotional intelligence skills in various countries. So we can see that even on the foundation of fundamental knowledge, there is room for discussion. Next, we will take a few examples of how we can learn to know ourselves and live together. Another one will be about tackling challenges together as a team. And then the last two parts will be dedicated to things that are not really at school or university, which can be encountered almost anywhere. It's about learning at all ages in a society where everyone is constantly learning. What other ways of learning can we develop that complement school and traditional learning systems? Some indeed speak of a learning ecosystem. It's not just an institution that delivers knowledge. It's certainly the way we organize learning on a large scale at all ages of life. And then the last part will be dedicated to the transformation of educational systems, because this is a point that will be extremely important in the coming years. And there are very good examples that give us insights on how to achieve these systemic transformations. So we will start with the current state of affairs as it stands. The next two photos, these and the ones after, are from the Transformation Education Summit, which was held in New York City in September 2022. And in 2022, we are in a somewhat peculiar situation because what we call the educational crisis has definitely and significantly reached an unprecedented level. There are nearly 170 million children who are not in class. And among those who are in the classroom, nearly 2/3 cannot read a simple story at the age of 10. These are the two components, which are commonly referred to as what the English call learning poverty. To understand what this global educational crisis means, if we take 100 children in developing countries, we will have approximately 37 who are in class and learning well, 9 who are not in class, and 44 who do not meet the level and cannot properly read a story. They do not understand a story they read at the age of around 10. And then, in orange, we will have approximately 10 more than 2 years ago, because 10 more have appeared due to the COVID pandemic. The pandemic was so tough, and if you remember, unfortunately, we were forced to close so many schools, that the global consequences are monstrous. There are some countries where the educational system is devastated because they have lost 2 years of education, and the situations were already very difficult. So this crisis undoubtedly adds to the previous ones, and today we have a system that is regressing compared to 2019. And the situation is very particularly worrisome and alarming for girls, especially in some countries where they were already attending school less or not at all compared to boys. In some countries, there is a significant gap, and it is all the more concerning because the education of girls is the most important factor for the social and economic development of a country, as well as its environmental development. The effects on the relationship between education and climate change have been significantly well studied. And the education of women is the primary factor that will enable birth control, because each additional year of education is a year during which the woman or young girl will be able to develop her capacities for choice, empowerment, agency, and the ability to think for herself and her self-determination and autonomy. And this is what will gradually allow for the regulation of births to focus on chosen births, not imposed births. In a country's demographic transition, this is a factor that matters greatly. However, demographics undoubtedly play a major role in the future of carbon emissions. It is not the only factor, but it is one of the significantly important and influential factors. If we now turn to the UNESCO report that was published in 2022, which provides the state of the art and suggests what needs to be done, I have extracted these phrases that are quite significant. Today, the major risks threatening humanity and the planet urge us to reinvent education to better prepare for the challenges that lie ahead. This act of reimagining involves collaboratively working together to create shared and interdependent futures. The critical role of education that we have seen in various aspects and the problems and challenges that we are currently facing must be overcome in the coming years so that we can envision a sustainable and durable world. The essential problem, as highlighted by the report, is that current teaching and learning methods are outdated, even counterproductive. They are indeed often at the root of some of our difficulties in meeting today's challenges. So it's not just about addressing the challenges of the educational crisis as we have seen it, it's also about profoundly transforming the system because it is currently partly obsolete in addressing our challenges. I will give you some examples of this obsolescence, for instance. Why does the UNESCO report write this sentence in the UNESCO report? Here is the official statement from the Minister of Education of Burkina Faso in September. In 2022, students in Burkina Faso know the cities of France better than those of their own country. This is a remarkable example of knowledge that is not necessarily useful, so the program is not suited to the needs of the country. But it's not a matter of country, no one escapes it. We all have a lot to clean up in front of our own door. And then it's not just a matter of education in the lower grades, it's also the case in universities. For example, doctors, whether in France, Belgium or the United States, various studies show that doctors become less and less empathetic as the years of study go by. Yet empathy is still one of the key skills for a doctor. So in our current educational framework, we have a study system, a university system, that will significantly diminish one of the most important skills needed for professional life. And it's not just doctors who will lose empathy over time, over the years. It's also that in general, the level of empathy has significantly decreased over the past 50 years. So here you have in the United States the study of the empathy levels of young doctors, which has been decreasing from the 70s to the present day. So the system that has been put in place, the evolution of the university system for medical studies, is indeed significantly eroding the empathy capacity of future doctors. So there is indeed definitely something to be done. Moreover, we can multiply the examples. I will take two more. The PISA system is the OECD system that ranks countries based on children's ability to read, do mathematics, and understand certain scientific concepts. So very regularly, Singapore is among the best countries in the world. So here it is first or second, depending on how you count, neck and neck with China. Well, the price to pay for this indeed extraordinary academic performance is that young Singaporeans are significantly much more anxious and stressed than used in other countries. And this is something that is extremely concerning indeed, and we will come back to it at the end of this video. So we have a system that might be exceptionally good at teaching a certain number of factors, but it will have negative impacts on essential skills, as we saw at the beginning, on self-esteem, self-confidence, the ability to learn, and well-being. One last example, which is a kind of extension of the first, is that the system in its massification, having to evaluate many people, has specialised, especially in Asia, in repeated very stereotyped tests in which one must score the maximum points. And this test, the high test score over learning, which Kyung-Him Kim talks about, indeed has very dramatic effects on young Asians, particularly in Singapore, China, and Korea. Kyung-Hee Kim is a researcher of South Korean origin who now works in the United States. She has experienced the Korean system up close, and she completed a thesis in Korea and another in the United States, focusing on creativity under the guidance of the world-renowned expert Torrance. Using the Torrance test, she showed that in the United States, since the 1990s, the creativity of young Americans has been decreasing over time, and that this was perfectly correlated with the fact that the use of this testing system was becoming more widespread. So we have a pedagogical mechanism, an ability to evaluate, a method for evaluation, which is correlated with a deficit of creativity. And creativity is also undoubtedly, indeed, certainly one of the key skills we need for today and tomorrow. So it made the headlines at the time. And it's all the more alarming because when creativity is lost or erodes, we lose a whole lot of other things. So, for example, there is indeed a strong correlation between the loss of creativity and the loss of curiosity. The loss of passion, or the ability to pursue one's passions, leads to a narrower view of the world, an aversion to risk, taking fewer risks, less desire to make mistakes, and therefore less learning. There is a decrease in the ability to collaborate, a decrease in imagination, and an increase in the sense of conformity and respect for the status quo. It's actually, in fact, exactly the opposite of what we need in order to transform a system. If you want to rewatch the video dedicated to the transformation of systems and the evolution of societies, it's exactly this set of skills that we need to develop collectively in order to be able to address our challenges together. So this is a very, very fundamentally important topic, and it needs to be looked at systemically because a number of countries are facing this important issue. This statement might be a bit harsh. Our current educational systems are perhaps training second-class robots that nobody needs. But it expresses, I think, quite accurately the feeling we have towards a part of the system that is perfectly sclerotic. Andreas Schleicher, the director of the education sector at the OECD, is the person who says this sentence. This is not just idle talk. This is one of the most important people on the international stage on the subject. He is the father of the PISA test, and he sees that countries are making a lot of significant efforts to improve on PISA, but at the same time, we are losing some of the important essential skills needed to become better people. So I will now take the last slide on this part, on the observation, from a slightly different, slightly offbeat point of view, but to show how this kind of headlong rush towards the ability to pass tests is relatively absurd. Noriko Arai, an AI researcher in Japan, successfully managed to get her AI admitted to the prestigious University of Tokyo. She had her AI take the entrance exams for the University of Tokyo, which had processed previous exam papers as part of its training. We've all done this at some point, doing as many typical exercises as possible. She did this. She took an artificial intelligence and asked it to digest past exams on history, mathematics, the ability to write in Japanese, and a whole bunch of other things. And the AI remarkably passed the tests and ultimately ended up in the top 20% of students from the University of Tokyo, except that this AI by design didn't truly understand the material. It merely passed the test by functioning as a robot. So, in my opinion, I think Andreas Schleicher's articulation makes more sense, which is that our system has gradually transformed into a system for selecting systematic, standardized robotic processes. And so in order to comply and get good grades, we lose some of the essential, very valuable and important qualities that we should instead be developing during our studies. So that's the crux of the problem. In addition to the educational crisis as it has been presented in a number of countries, and we are not immune to it resurfacing in certain places regardless of the country, there is also this fundamental question about the skills to be acquired and how we acquire them. So all this leads the UNESCO report to conclude that a radical and urgent reform of education at the global level is necessary to repair the injustices of the past and strengthen our ability to act together for a more sustainable future. So this radical reform, we will look at the different parts to see how it can be implemented, what already exists and what we can build on. So if we move on to the next section about learning fundamental knowledge, there are many countries, as we have seen, where the situation is very, very difficult. And there are also, fortunately, plenty of amazing people and countries doing remarkable things, and I wanted to present a few of them to you because it is absolutely remarkable. This is a Brookings Institute report from a few years ago called Millions Learning, Scaling Up Quality Education in Developing Countries, which discusses how to scale up education models in developing countries. And the Brookings Institute, I will also talk about it at the end, is an important institution because it has been studying educational policies around the world for 100 years, so it knows these subjects well. In this report, there is a selection of, obviously you can't read it, but that's not the point. It's just to illustrate the fact that it comes from all over the world. In this report, there is a selection of remarkable initiatives from all around the globe. I have chosen to present 3 of them to you. The first one, called Escuela Nueva, was an innovative model created by Vicky Colbert in Colombia. Vicky Colbert, a visionary educator, created a comprehensive and innovative system to truly reach remote and underserved places in Colombia where there were no schools anymore, where children were completely out of school and had no access to education. And she implemented a method and processes to significantly improve the quality of primary and secondary schools. And then, with very particular methods compared to classical methods, learning was systematically active, cooperative, students teach each other, there is a lot of peer tutoring and peer mentoring. Teachers and administrators play the role of facilitators and guides. They start from the principle that if we put the child in the position of a learner and are no longer there to give them content but rather to develop their skills, we will definitely achieve better results. And indeed, it has succeeded in educating several million children over the years. The model has been replicated in approximately 10 countries, and it has trained many teachers in total. It is truly remarkable and inspiring work that she continues to do, and she was the first person to receive the prestigious and highly coveted WISE Prize for Education. Another example comes this time from Bangladesh, a truly poor country among the poorest, where a truly, truly inspiring man, Mr. Abed, whom they call Abed Bey, Brother Abed, was a person who worked in the private sector, had a very good position, and then overnight changed everything to focus on how to help the poorest. And in the 70s, he implemented a program to help the entire population, especially those who are the most distant from traditional channels, understand how to prepare water for rehydration during diarrhea epidemics. The program aimed to provide detailed instructions on how to prepare water for rehydration and to educate the public on the importance of proper hydration during severe and widespread diarrhea epidemics that were affecting the country. The country was ravaged by diarrhea epidemics. And he designed a program based on television, radio, and word of mouth to really get close to the populations in order to effectively explain how to rehydrate without recontaminating. And in 10 years, 75% of the population had acquired this knowledge and perpetuated it within families. So it has been one of the ways to collectively protect against diarrheal episodes in various communities. So building on that, but not only that, he created an NGO that is multifaceted and does a lot of things, particularly in education. If you visit the website, you will see all the things they do. It's absolutely extraordinary. It stands out as the leading non-state actor in Bangladesh for education, particularly in children's education. And so, by focusing once again on very specific methods and thoroughly, because depending on each problem, it will find a particular solution in a detailed manner. You can learn via radio, you can learn by phone. During COVID, everyone is at home. You have to find other ways to learn. I think we've all experienced that by now. Since the 70s, they have been developing alternative methods to be able to effectively incorporate the acquisition of knowledge and skills in a different and efficient way. And the numbers clearly speak for themselves. In total, and evidently, almost 14 million children have been successfully trained. The dropout rate is below 5%, which means that people are really very engaged indeed in their learning. And each and every year there are approximately 3 million learners in total managed by the NGO BRAC. Approximately 3 million people in Bangladesh and in a number of various other countries because they've spread to many other countries. This method has flourished significantly and has been able to develop successfully in other countries. I wanted to very briefly mention Friendship, another exceptional NGO in Bangladesh that was founded by Runa Khan. She entered through the health pathway, which was designed to promote wellness and ensure a safe environment. It has helped treat more than 5 million people by building hospital ships that went directly to the populations. It's a similar story because it's somewhat the same types of problems. Runa Khan has developed a systemic approach where, due to these boats and the proximity to the population, she has been interested in health, microcredit, economic development, and people's ability to learn various things. Now she is focusing on education with figures that are to the less impressive than BRAC, but it's really the same exact subject. And we see this global and systemic effect, and it's not just a particular subject they are addressing. A third example is a revolution that is currently ongoing and is currently underway in Sierra Leone. It's a rather unique story because David Senge, the one holding the small binoculars and who is therefore the Minister of Education of Sierra Leone, is also the Director General of Innovation for the government of Sierra Leone. He is a truly fascinating and impressive individual. After studying at Harvard University, he went on to MIT, where he developed many innovative projects. One of his most notable achievements is a method for designing prosthetics tailored specifically to individual needs. These prosthetics can be created in a fab lab, allowing them to be perfectly adapted to the shape of the user's residual limb. Sierra Leone, if you don't know, has been a country that suffered from an absolutely atrocious civil war in the past, and numerous people are amputees or have severe physical disabilities. So, to address this problem and provide comfort, a particular method was developed, which definitely allows for precise molding. In this logic, he clearly sees the benefit of helping people solve their own problems, and also then the benefit of having a good education. Upon returning to his country, the Minister of Education takes a global perspective on the transformation of the educational system. First, making sure everyone has access to quality education. So he is setting up a system including many things in video and indirect access because there are not enough teachers. So he invests in different types of computers and communication devices, a bit like BRAC. He wants to focus on girls, students with disabilities, and children who live in remote areas and do not have access to education. It's really about inclusivity first, and then about the method, the ability to develop things that are necessary for oneself and for one's community. We are following a systemic logic, and the program started several years ago should be closely monitored, because we are always following the same logic of trying to meet needs by acquiring the knowledge and skills that are absolutely necessary. That concludes this part and the possible ways to consider solutions to this very important educational crisis in the coming years in various ways and approaches that we have discussed in detail throughout this presentation. So now we move on to a second part that is dedicated to methods for learning to know oneself and to live together. So it is about learning what the Anglo-Saxons call social emotional learning in French, apprentissage socio-emotionnel, with 5 major domains: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, interpersonal relationships, and decision-making. The 5 are connected because they allow for transitioning from one to another. What is written here, self-awareness, is knowing a person's emotions and values, as well as their strengths and challenges. There is already a link with empathy, managing one's emotions and behaviours to achieve one's goals. We see it is linked to decision-making, social awareness, showing understanding and empathy, interpersonal relationships, developing positive relationships, teamwork, and effectively handling conflicts. In short, all these subjects are skills that ensure a fair balance between becoming a better person and living together, if we refer back to the initial categories. And so the world champion I don't know, but in any case a country that has been doing this for a very long time is Denmark. Denmark undoubtedly believes that the secret to happiness is truly education, which should be the foundation of human society and its cohesion. Denmark has developed, though it would go far beyond the scope of this presentation, in various ways ever since the 19th century. The Nordic countries have been engaged in a fascinating process of building the school system, which we might be able to discuss in another video. What I wanted to say here is that it is the first country to have created a mandatory empathy course system, so there is 1 hour per week, and obviously there are no grades and there is no particular method. There is no curriculum to follow. It is a time dedicated to reflective thinking, to the ability to see with oneself and with others how we understand our own emotions, how we understand the emotions of others, and whether we are capable of putting ourselves in their place. So there are now numerous projects to develop empathy in different parts of the world, Roots of Empathy, for example, but it is Denmark that probably has the most experience on the subject and would not go back because it brings a lot of benefits to individuals and society. Another example comes from an Indian NGO called Dream a Dream, which was founded by Vishal Talreya, who is also an incredibly, absolutely remarkable person, and who already had a network of schools where he helped the very poorest children in India find the path to inner development. So, teaching them to learn in various ways resilience and self-esteem. They relied heavily on their personal and collective development skills. And a few years ago, he established a partnership in collaboration with the government of the city of Delhi to develop what they called the happiness curricula. That is, how to structure a comprehensive and effective educational program that can be deployed in all classes to help children with this socio-emotional learning based on their experiences, their stories, and their positions. It is an ongoing experiment that reaches nearly 800,000 children. So on this socio-emotional learning, it brings us on the side of living together, it brings us to the way we cooperate and how we can develop cooperation. I took 3 examples. The first one is an experiment, an Australian initiative by Jack Manning Bancroft. Jack is also quite a remarkable person. He is from the First Nations, which means he is an Aboriginal person, and he suffered from discrimination at school, and he suffered from being different, which was very difficult for him. From this frustration and personal wound, he developed a program called AIM, which stands for the Australian Indigenous Mentoring Experience. This mentoring program is designed to support young people in Australia. Additionally, since he speaks French, AME is love and can also symbolize mentoring. And this AIM, it's a comprehensive program that will connect brilliant students who have a good understanding with students from disadvantaged backgrounds, providing them with support. This initiative is aimed at helping primarily people from the First Nations, ensuring they receive opportunities. I think we still say Aboriginals, but they actually call it First Nations people. And this mentoring system allows students, such as those in a master's program, to go and train students in middle school or high school in various ways. And this system has allowed nearly 7,000 mentors wanting to play the game of this national reconciliation to help about 25,000 young people in difficulty. So it's a program that has gained great momentum, and it's the flagship program they launched at the beginning. Now, they are doing many other things. They are really very stimulating. In France, in a completely different context, in the series of intergenerational mutual aid or mentorship, L'outil en main, the tool in hand, is an association that was founded in the 90s and now includes many others. There are more than 200 associations that are grouped by this association. It encompasses approximately 70 territories, making it well established across the region. And as you can clearly see in the image, the main idea here is to create a connection between a retired individual who possesses technical, material and manual knowledge, and to explore how we can spark vocations or, at the very least, create meaningful connections and allow young people to test their interest in a number of things. And what is interesting in this approach is first having the opportunity to try working with various materials such as wood, metals, cooking, gardening, and a whole bunch of different other things. And then, if there is a genuine appetite at that moment, a connection is created with a mentor and then guidance to develop one's qualities. Another form of collaboration, which might be a bit more exotic for the French model, is extensive and radical cooperation between teachers. It is a model that was originally born in Japan but has since developed and evolved in other countries and has continued to thrive. I observed it in Singapore. There are other Asian countries in particular that use it. The principle is indeed quite simple. As you can see, there are students. What we don't see is the teacher who teaches. And what we see, there are other teachers. It's quite impressive. You are teaching in front of other teachers. And the mission, so there is an educational objective, which is to say, here, I have this difficulty, I struggle to, a third of my students don't understand fractions, there's something that's not clicking, I don't quite understand, etc. So at that moment, they set up a real research protocol. You have all the colleagues who will divide the task of observing something in particular. It could be that each person will observe one or two students. It could be the teacher's posture, the way they express themselves. And at the end of the course, everyone gathers and the general 360-degree feedback on how the class went is given to the teacher, who can then see the areas where they can improve, because when you do something by nature, you don't see how you do it. And it's obviously not one-sided. Once that's done, maybe in the next step, the following month, the teacher in question will be part of the group of people who will observe how a colleague works, how they teach. We are indeed no longer in a state of distrust, judgment, and hierarchy. On the contrary, we are in the best way to learn in a group, to create cohesion and help learn together. So there are other initiatives, I'll go through them swiftly, but it's almost obvious. In today's world and the world of tomorrow, one of the things we miss the most is our relationship with nature, which is dwindling and eroding, which fades away over time. So the Children Nature Network, a global association, aims to collect and compile all relevant initiatives, research papers and events on how to effectively bring nature back into the school environment, most of the time by actively putting students in direct contact with nature. This is, for example, the case of Opepa in Colombia, led by Luis Camargo, who has been doing this for years and has enabled tens of thousands of young Colombians to discover how the forest and nature work and interact. But it can be full of other dimensions. I draw your attention to their slogan, which is quite interesting. More green, less screen. More living, less screens. More living beings, less screens, because according to their figures, which are based on the United States, but I would be curious about ours, they talk about 44 hours in front of screens per week and 10 minutes outdoor per week. So it's clear that we're not out of the woods yet. With numbers like these, how do you expect us to collectively care about living in harmony with nature if we don't know it at all? This is also a very important topic that we too often forget. So in the upcoming section, we will now look at initiatives that focus on how to learn to tackle challenges together in more detail. That is how, instead of learning something just to get a grade, we learn to carry out a personal or collective project that meets a need in a meaningful way, with a deeper understanding, and that can be applied in real-life situations. And this is the big question for Antonio Guterres, who is the Secretary General of the United Nations. When he was giving his closing speech at the Transformation Education Summit in September, he said this phrase: "Education must help people learn to learn by focusing on problem solving and collaboration." This is truly the cornerstone of the system's ability to transform. For the system to transform, we ourselves need to learn how to transform the environment around us and, in a systemic way, be capable of action, to increase our capacity for action, and not simply think that the institutions will do the work, or that the market will do the work, or that someone else will do the work. It's up to all of us to do the work. So for that, a few more examples in the school setting, and then we will move on to the university world. One of the most remarkable and influential models from this perspective is Design for Change, which was created by Kiran Bir-Sethi in India, specifically at Riverside, and has since flourished in more than 60 countries. Something very simple in principle, but indeed extremely powerful in its application. It is essentially about asking children to go through a sequence, which is to feel, imagine, do, and then finally share. So what does that mean? To feel, it's about what moves us emotionally, what sparks our interest, the things we are not comfortable with and would like to be able to do something about. Then imagine what we can do at our level to improve the situation regarding what we find uncomfortable or unjust by considering, reflecting, and discussing ways and methods we can personally and collectively use, and then act, implement what we have imagined, and thus learn a tremendous amount of knowledge and skills throughout this process. And then, whether we have succeeded, failed, or are halfway there, share what we have done so we can discuss it with others and learn with others. So it is a method simple in expression and powerful in execution. The French version of Design for Change is called Bâtisseur de Possibles. It was launched by SynLab a few years ago and has done very, very well in France too. From the moment we managed to develop this mindset in young people, we can indeed achieve truly absolutely incredible results. Obviously, it's not for everyone, but there are some who are absolutely incredible. Flore Vasseur made a documentary called Bigger Than Us, which I recommend. It showcases the journeys of some young people around the world who have done exceptional things at a very early age. We follow the journey of Melati Wyson, who established an NGO to fight against pollution in Bali when she was 12 years old with her sister. And then she went out to meet the world, encountering other young people who are actively doing various impactful things and connecting with numerous organizations that are deeply interested in addressing the issue of plastic pollution. And then I have given you two other quite remarkable examples. Mohamed Al-Junde is a Lebanese child who, seeing the arrival of Syrian refugees in a state of destitution that you can imagine, created a school at the age of 12. He created a school to welcome young Syrian children and give them the ability to learn. And then there's Memory Banda, who in Malawi, as a young girl, discovered the horror of the forced marriage system for young girls, which was a widespread and deeply ingrained practice. Not wanting a member of her family to be forced to marry someone she didn't want, she worked tirelessly and with great determination to change the law in her country and ban marriage below a certain age. So these are obviously exceptional figures. They are definitely a kind of heroes. But if we knew these stories a little better, and if we recognised a bit more around us all the similar stories that exist on different scales, we could more easily spark the interest of young people to try to do things, because they too can contribute to changing the system, and this at all ages. So there is another example, very quickly, which is also quite remarkable. In France, the Poissy lobby, which was thoroughly covered by a series of videos made by Elsa da Costa Grandier. Here, It's the story of children in the 5th grade who are really fascinated in the earth and then actually discover the problems caused by human activities. So who? They create a comic book on the subject. This comic book wins an award, so they go to meet Hubert Reeves. Then they take another step and meet Nicolas Hulot, and then another step, and they end up writing a charter of the rights of the planet, and they present it, and this is the photo here. In the meantime, they have grown up, they moved up to 6th grade, and then to continue their work, they created a junior enterprise to be able to meet and continue their work after school. And this photo shows the important and significant meeting where they present their Charter of the Rights of the Planet to Ursula von der Leyen at the European Parliament. So it's quite an extraordinary narrative, especially when you know that they come from a priority education zone and that this was not at all the destiny that was expected for them. So this is also part of the essential elements, that it is possible for everyone, and especially in the most disadvantaged places. As I believe we have just seen from all the elements, things can happen absolutely everywhere, and that's what's important. So there are other ways to get involved in various ways and create processes of construction and methods of challenge resolution. We can also learn through research. This is a program we developed at the Learning Planet Institute with Ange Anso called Les Aventuriers, where we invite young children. The program starts like Design for Change. Starting at the young age of 4, we can begin this wonderful and enriching program with the young children. And here, the goal is to encourage them to question a topic and to develop research skills at their level in order to try to provide answers to the questions that have arisen by developing experimental protocols, again at their level, by creating small prototypes, and so on. And the essential point here is to make the connection between the teacher who is interested in this educational project and wants to support a class, and depending on the subject they have chosen between the teacher and the students, to pair them with a mentor who knows this field, who is an expert in this field, either because they are a researcher, a PhD student, or someone with a master's degree on the subject, and who can therefore help the class, not by giving them the answer, but by guiding them on the method. So here it's a change of posture. We're only talking about a change of posture, actually, if you look closely. But the teacher doesn't necessarily have the answer. The teacher will search with the students, and that's what changes everything. And then, the last modality I wanted to present to you, there are many others, but this one is very exemplary, is developing things through play, such as role-playing and storytelling. Because ultimately, as human beings, we are mammalian creatures. Play is the best way to learn. It's the same for many species and us. Look at how children learn. And so there are people who have taken this logic very far. So Quest to Learn is a school in New York that is based on learning through play. But it's not just learning through play. Essential knowledge and skills are learned through play. But for the students to really understand how it works, they have exercises where they play games to learn knowledge and skills that interest them. So developing games that have the mission to develop particular skills, that's an approach that is indeed very interesting. And I'll just take an example that wasn't developed by Quest to Learn, but that some of you might know. Our teens and preteens are really passionate about a game called Minecraft, where players can create incredible structures online, much like building with Lego. I think it's a game that everyone is familiar with. What everyone might not know is that Minecraft is actually a decentralized system with a variety of different servers, so you choose where you want to play. Young children, because it starts very early when they catch the bug, quickly discover that some servers have guidelines and rules that are different from one another, since it is the server owner who decides which rules and regulations to apply. And so they discover that they are experiencing different regulatory systems, different institutions, if you will, and they choose the ones that suit them best. They also engage in debates, sometimes very technical, about the importance of certain regulations or how to change the rules or how to organise the community's life differently because they find that they have been treated fairly or unfairly, etc. So they develop We think they are playing with Lego, but in fact they are developing a remarkable capacity for systemic analysis of regulation, and it is a very good way to test, for example, political systems or agreements within a community. So now, let's move on to the university. The university, in quotes, is an extension of what we've just discussed. It's where things can gain even more momentum because there are many project-based learnings and we have contact with research. And if we look closely, the numbers might not be exactly those, but the order of magnitude is that there are about 100 million students in universities today worldwide. Imagine that these students are not just learning the fundamentals of their discipline, but are learning them through the construction of a personal or collective project to tackle issues they have, or that the city has, or that their community has. We're no longer quite on the same subject. We get 100 million solution researchers who are in training, but who learn through research and social entrepreneurship. So if we imagine Design for Change and the Saventuriers on the scale of the universities of the planet, we get a force. We unleash human creativity on an absolutely unprecedented scale. This topic has been frequently discussed for quite some time. In fact, Jeff Mulgan wrote a paper on it nearly 10 years ago. But it's a kind of imperative today because in the situation we're in, it's one of the most promising pathways. And besides, it's what the students want, so it works out well. What can schools and universities do? I have chosen 4 elements. First, we need to start by teaching transitions, as if we don't know what we're talking about. If we don't understand the nature of the problems we are facing, it's difficult to see what we can do. So, withdrawing into oneself or giving up is still what will naturally happen. So, one of the objectives here is precisely to present elements that can provoke reactions, educate, and potentially inspire the desire to go further in learning to develop certain topics. Teaching transitions is indeed essential. The second is really helping students find their path. It's not always very easy to find a subject one wants to get involved in. What will be important for our orientation? It's our professional orientation, but it can also be, and it's a good way to find it, what type of project we would like to implement. Next, engage the learners to address their challenges. That's what I was saying earlier. There are quite a few ways to do that. We'll see that right away. And then, on a slightly more macro scale, if we now look at it as a university, how we can draw inspiration from university models that have already implemented all or part of this to inspire ourselves. I think it's important to highlight this as well. So we start by teaching transitions. We have good news in France, as it will be happening soon, since the Minister of Higher Education and Research announced it on October 20th, 2022. All existing training programs will need to evolve to integrate the challenges of the ecological transition. Why will it be necessary? New training programs will be offered to students to prepare them for the new profession of ecological transition. For example, there is a shortage of more than 10,000 engineers. This is one example of the need for specialized knowledge in renewable energy to support progress over the next decade. But when we look at everything that can be implemented and what needs to be done, and the previous videos give an overview of this, it is clear that the job market and the training market are indeed not at all aligned with the needs. So this transformation, we hope that this announcement will help move in the right direction. So now, how do we help students find their path? What we have implemented here, and which has been developed later in other universities, and I think around the world, there must be many examples of this now, is how do you manage to help students find what suits them? So we use the Ikigai method. Very quickly, it is a series of questionnaires and group discussions that allow everyone to better understand the first thing, what we like to do. The second, what we know how to do, what we are good at, or what we want to learn. The third, what the world needs, is to indeed understand the reality of the stakes and the problems to which we can contribute. And then the fourth, what we get paid for, or what we can find necessary and essential resources for, which will allow the implementation of our project. Ideally, the project or the desire to project oneself or the professional project or the career or the vocation will be found in this area once we have done this exercise. And what is interesting about this exercise is that it is not a static exercise. We don't do it once and for all. We do it once in order to identify determinants thoroughly and comprehensively, and it forces us to put ourselves in a detailed manner in an approach to identify other things, to perhaps look at something else, and to finally say to oneself, I have things here, there, and there that I can't make coincide, and this allows for evolution. One can regularly do this throughout their entire life to see how they can improve and find their own meaning, align with their own abilities, values, and desire to act. So this is indeed something that works very well and therefore could be generalized. To engage students effectively, nothing beats a friendly competition or a collaborative challenge among groups. There are many options available to foster this spirit of teamwork and healthy competition. iGEM, they've been doing this for over 15 years in the field of genetics, as well as synthetic biology. The Gigaton Challenge, perhaps one of the latest initiatives, is about how we invite student collectives to think about the best ways to reduce CO2 emissions. We had set up the SDG School, and there is the Universities for SDG Award. I won't list them all, as there are actually many more than that. It's a moment that is not part of the actual curriculum. It's often on the fringe of the program, but it allows students to develop their creativity, tenacity, ability to collaborate, solve problems, and apply all their skills to develop them. It can also be integrated directly into the curriculum at the university. For example, it can make up a third of the program or half of the program. It's a personal project or a group project, and it can be developed like this in a bachelor's or master's degree. All our projects and university programs are built on this foundation. How do we help students find their project and develop it? And there are many universities that do this. One of the leading universities now, if you want to look at the best in university system transformation, one of the very best is the renowned and highly regarded Arizona State University. This is largely attributed to the exceptionally visionary leadership of its president, Michael Crow, who wrote 2 books on the transformation of the university system, Designing the New American University, and The Fifth Wave, The Evolution of American Higher Education, which paints an extremely harsh picture of the situation in the United States. We have indeed seen the issue of tests and creativity. What can be added is that it is a race, a hyper-competition that is very, very difficult among researchers, which also leads to an explosion of disciplines and prevents working together on problems. And then there is obviously the issue of money, which is very, very important because the astronomical cost of education today leaves many people out. And so he takes the opposite approach. Indeed, 20 years ago, when he took the helm of Arizona State University, which was a small provincial university in the state of Arizona, he remarkably turned it into a global leader in 20 years. For 8 consecutive years, it has received the award for the most innovative university in the United States, given by its peers, meaning the presidents of other American universities, including the largest and most prestigious ones. What I find remarkable in the charter Michael Crow crafted 20 years ago, when he took the helm of Arizona State University, is that it remains the guiding principle for everyone who joins, adheres to the project, and wishes to collaborate with him. The university is a public research university that measures itself not by those it excludes, but by those it includes. So compared to all the universities that charge very high entrance fees, we are dealing with a completely different subject. It's not about having the top 5% and making very, very brilliant people pay the maximum to try to bring them as high as possible. Focus on what we do for the other 95%. We also address the 5%, but focus on what we do for everyone else. It is not measured by those it excludes, but by those it includes and how they succeed. It's not just about having managed to bring them to a certain level. It's about following up with them afterward and ensuring that they will develop well, integrate into society, find a job that will allow them to live decently and so on. And so, in fact, he puts the university at the service of its territory. And by doing so, he is able to create an absolutely exceptional territorial dynamic, since the city of Phoenix today is a sort of extension of the Arizona State University campus, where the connections are permanent and the city can come and propose topics or problems to be solved by the universities, etc. If we complete this charter, which is exceptional, it measures itself by those it includes and not those it excludes by the way they succeed, which advances research and the discovery of public interests. Therefore, what matters is the general interest, and it assumes the fundamental responsibility for the economic, social, cultural, and general health of the communities it serves. Arizona State University, dedicated to serving the community and addressing social issues, has embraced sustainability concerns. It is the leading university on these issues. And one of the remarkable things that Arizona State University develops is the creation of colleges. While they also have departments by discipline like everyone else, they create schools or colleges or groups of researchers on specific topics. And so you have the latest edition, the College of Global Futures, which is indeed a very impressive and remarkably noteworthy entity. There are now 4 schools, one focused on the future of innovation in society, another on sustainability, the third on complex systems, and the fourth on the future of the ocean. We are dealing with subjects that are fundamentally interdisciplinary, complex, and necessary to work on. And the question is, how do we address and respond to the challenges, rather than how do we advance the disciplines? And that is indeed a change, a radical approach at Arizona State University that can only inspire us all to attempt to accomplish exactly the same. So I took another example in Ghana, Ashesi University, which was created by a gentleman named Patrick Awa, who worked at Microsoft in the United States, if I remember correctly, and who is originally from Ghana. He once said that he wanted to truly dedicate the rest of his life to helping Ghana. His thorough and comprehensive systemic analysis of the problem is that there were not enough competent people to occupy leadership positions, whether public or private, but especially public, which is fundamentally about the common good, and that in order to try to combat issues of corruption, clan problems, etc., it was necessary to structure a community of brilliant people, capable of helping each other, even if they are not on the same side, to respect each other, and to advance the democracy of institutions. So he embarked on a long-term project which was aimed at building a form of elite in the country. This elite would be capable of managing the country in the general interest, ensuring that the needs of the public were met and that the nation prospered. And so he built this university with that in mind. He brings in students from all over Ghana with a scholarship system to make it as inclusive as possible, and teaches them the best ways to make decisions, govern, have good models of functioning institutions, and so on. It is indeed a very complementary model to that of Arizona State University, but the two actually have one thing in common, and perhaps this is truly the denominator of what all universities and schools today should focus on: how we try to solve the most important and fundamental problems, namely our relationship to the public interest, our relationship to the common good, and how we recreate a way to govern them effectively. This slide will allow me to transition to the next section, which is about learning at all ages of life, and thus stepping a bit outside the walls of the university. It turns out that we are going to stay within the walls of the university. This is an initiative of NUS, the National University of Singapore. This initiative is truly quite astonishing. A few years ago, they announced that one could be a student for life at NUS. Once we were admitted, we had a drawing right. Each year we could take courses at NUS for at least 20 years and more. This program is particularly fascinating because its main goal, as you might expect, is to retain people. It aims to keep individuals engaged and interested over a longer period. But I don't know how long it's been since you went to university. It's not quite the same to say that you're a lifelong student at your university and that you can come back every year to take the courses you want in the subjects you want. There are a few that are free per year, so you have a minimum of professional training or intellectual training. If you are interested or passionate about other subjects, you can take a minimum of them. And if you definitely want to take more than the minimum, you pay. So it's a way for them to retain their alumni. And it's a lifelong development model that recreates connections. Once students have left after their bachelor's or master's degrees, no, they stay. There's a sense of respect, reverence, and a bond that forms. There are various different ways to connect with the university and become an integral part of the life of the community. An astonishing experience in Senegal is that of the ENO, the Open Digital Spaces. The Virtual University of Senegal, which is based in Dakar, aims to create online courses, but it's not enough to create online courses because who will take them and under what conditions? So the government has created Open Digital Spaces. Today there are 16, I believe, and the goal is to have 50, one per prefecture, to cover the entire territory. These are places with a lot of computer equipment, of course, to be able to follow the courses, but also to work collaboratively on projects, to create classes, bring in speakers, discuss city issues to see what we can do together, etc. It creates a link between the territories. It goes well beyond the university relationship and the course. For instance, this is also where telemedicine is already being practiced. You can easily have an ultrasound done on the other side of the country, send the images, and the doctor will quickly review them and give their opinion. To create a unique space where communities can connect and engage with expertise, the ability to have this expertise disseminated everywhere in various ways, they found a way to upskill everyone and meet the needs of local populations. So this is something interesting, a very interesting model to follow, because if it proves successful, it can be applied in many places. Obviously, we learn at all ages of life, everywhere in various ways. The place where we used to learn was the library. Helsinki completely renovated this library, the Udi Library, which I had the chance to visit. It is indeed quite a remarkable place. It's Finnish design, so naturally it's remarkable. But it's not just a place where you can come to read. It's a place where you can come with your children to play, learn, and then where you can also go to work in maker spaces, where you can go to sew, where you can take classes, and where you can eventually build something in the 3D universe. It is not just a library, it's also a space that is more like a fab lab and combines different uses. This is what indeed makes this place truly interesting, because it will allow people to come together, create connections, bring projects to life, and have a sufficient critical mass of people who are knowledgeable about the subjects to be able to help and collaborate. So it's about, in essence, recreating a new and innovative form of learning space, essentially starting from libraries. We have a very similar example right next to us, the Climate Academy, which is the former town hall of the 4th arrondissement, which was renamed when the districts were merged and it became the Climate Academy, where young people, initially intended for young people, but there are young and then not so young people who come. It is freely accessible to attend conferences, learn, discuss projects, develop projects, and it is a place where you can find people interested in the same subject and who can help answer questions. It is a place where you can seek expertise, a place where you can develop your interests. So we are indeed also dealing with a more territorial system, which is not directly related to the university. So we can go even further, definitely, I would say, as we move away from the logic of school and university. Claire Hebert-Suffren is someone who, in the 1970s with her husband, began to design reciprocal knowledge exchange networks. So It's initially very simple. It starts from three relatively obvious fundamental principles. No one knows everything. Everyone knows something, and therefore we all have an interest in learning from each other in various ways. How does it work? If you are, as was his case, in a very diverse environment where there are people from many different countries and backgrounds, you have a lot of mixing. For example, some need to learn French, while others cannot provide this service in French, at least initially, because they do not speak it. On the other hand, they might know how to play the guitar, the oud, cook, write poetry, and many other things. So what Claire has set up is a very simple system where if you give someone an hour by teaching them something, you earn a 1 hour credit within the community to learn something else. And it doesn't necessarily have to be reciprocal directly. It's not someone who will learn guitar and the other will teach them cooking. It can be in a system where you give to someone and someone else gives to you. But regarding the entire system, it's a small chart where we put everyone's hours, enabling exchanges, conviviality, cooperation, mutual aid, and above all, an interesting sense of community. So it is indeed very organizing and structuring for the community, and in fact very simple to implement. One of the secrets of how reciprocal knowledge exchange networks actually work is that what really matters is spending time with someone, regardless of their level. So if you have a thesis, you are a researcher at CNRS and you dedicate an hour of your subject to someone, and if this person teaches you cooking, you are equal because you have spent the same amount of hours training each other. This brings us back to something that is very inclusive and at the same time very virtuous, making the community much more dynamic. So we go even further with the experiences of Manish Jain, who is a great education specialist and has been a consultant for UNESCO for years. So he really has a radical approach to transformation through education. He believes that we need to deconstruct everything we know about it and indeed go back to very, very deep fundamentals. And one of the most truly remarkable and incredibly significant things I find that he has done is his initiative in Jaipur, where he went to teach and set up learning systems with inmates. Because here we are in a prison. The people who come here to recite poetry and for others to present their concert are inmates living in a cell with no future prospects. He will work on their ability to absorb knowledge, develop their own resilience, their self-esteem, rediscover the interest in learning, and from that build a project of expression, communication, and recreate connections. As a result, when they are released, it is quite obvious that they obviously have much less chance of returning, and most importantly, they have regained self-esteem and dignity that allows them to reintegrate into society. So one can definitely learn at any age, in any place, and under absolutely any conditions. And if we want to create these conditions of inclusivity and sustainability, we must explore all possible avenues. So the last one, to go almost a step further, but I don't know, it's not a competition, but a subject that might be even more touching, is the experience of Libraries Without Borders, which for years now has been able to bring learning capabilities to refugee camps or places where there is nothing left, thanks to this small device that I will explain to you. So a refugee camp, as we discussed with Bigger Than Us, is a place where suddenly you have a lot of people and there's nothing. Everything needs to be organized. By design, there are no schools, no learning systems, not even books. There's nothing left. How do you want to handle things for the kids? How do you want to handle things for the teachers? It's extremely complicated to recreate things. And so in partnership with the Refugee Commission and with Philippe Stark, they designed these small kits that are intended to be sent to a place where there are not only resources but also devices to use those resources. So you deploy them and they become tables and chairs. You have the option to have books in the languages that are spoken. You now have tablets and computers that are connected and ready. There are USB drives. For places where there is no internet access, there are USB drives that have all of Wikipedia on them, for instance. So How do we create a kind of emergency learning situation that allows for a minimum input to create a place where one can learn effectively? It is crucial to note that in these refugee camps, on average, people tend to stay for about approximately 15 or even 17 years. That's about the scale of it. So there are children who were born in refugee camps and who will spend their entire childhood and adolescence in a refugee camp. If we lack the capacity to support these 70 million people and cannot develop learning systems that ensure them a fulfilling emotional, intellectual, and cognitive life in every possible way, these individuals may ultimately be left underserved and unable to fully contribute to society. Very, very difficult. Who? Finally, who? Who will be really in terrible conditions afterwards? Another example of how, if we think about problems in a variety of different and unique ways and in a different manner, we can achieve quite exceptional things. I'll stop here with my very brief overview, looking left and right of some examples of what can be done to think about a different way of learning and teaching in the area. And then for the last two examples, I will focus on the transformation of systems. That is, how do we approach. Here we have talked about many things that are remarkable, that are very moving, which on a large scale are things that are not, except for the example of Sierra Leone, directed by a ministry, and therefore are not state-run, and therefore are subject to a whole range of uncertainties, and can be a complementary system, particularly for the poorest, but are not intended to replace or transform. So how do you go about transforming a system? This is a really essential question for everything we've just discussed in this video and all the others. And the report that has just been released, called Transforming Education Systems, the Why, the What and the How, which was prepared for the New York Summit on Transforming Education Systems, which I have already mentioned to you, comes from the Brookings Institute, which I have also mentioned to you, and has been studying this issue for 100 years. This phrase that I have highlighted is indeed very fundamental in analysing the various successful transformations. The transformation must begin with an examination of the goals of our educational systems. A frank and honest assessment is needed. Are the objectives suitable today, and are they widely shared by society? If the answer is no, the transformation involves repositioning all components of the educational system so that they contribute coherently to a new shared goal. This is the essential point. If we don't have a shared goal, obviously we are not all moving in the same direction. It's a given. And at the same time, if you remember the beginning, one of the fundamental problems in the educational system is that there are several objectives that can be partly contradictory, and we don't all have the same visions about it, but we also don't have a place to discuss it. To discuss today's system, and even more so, to discuss the system of tomorrow. However, to transform an educational system, it is quite fast. After all, it takes 10 years. Well, it takes 10 years. So let's say if you have a 5-year electoral mandate and there is regular alternation, if everyone keeps undoing what the previous one did, we won't get anywhere. There is really indeed a need to have a construction, a common goal that truly transcends political sensitivities. It is a societal project that must be absolutely certain of its long-term sustainability over an extended period of time. So I will present you with two examples of things that have worked. For instance, I could have mentioned Finland, I could have mentioned Portugal, etc. But I became interested in British Columbia because I find the example absolutely remarkable. In 2009, almost 15 years ago now, they were already very good at PISA, among the top. And then they asked themselves the question, we're among the top at PISA, right? Well, we're among the top, but are our children indeed learning the right things? They are very good at learning what they are taught, but are they learning the right things? So, Roderick Allen, who was responsible for this operation in collaboration with the government of British Columbia, conducted an extensive and comprehensive consultation within the territory on what children should learn, what they learn well, and what they should learn. And what comes up is that teachers are doing a remarkable job. children are learning very well what they need to learn, but in fact, teachers are doing an amazing job, I quote, of preparing students for a world that no longer exists. What they are not learning is not at all what they need. They observe that the children face numerous challenges. They lack initiative, resilience, and tenacity, struggle with cooperation, and are unable to identify problems for resolution. Additionally, they have difficulty teaching themselves new things and lack the skills to learn how to learn effectively. So, based on that, there is a consensus among the ministry, the unions, the teachers, and the parents to say that on this basis we are going to build a new curriculum. We are going to develop content and methods to do things differently. And the key is to essentially and completely abandon the idea of the program for them. This is becoming the essential topic. Starting from this, the paradigm shift for them will be, instead of being obsessed with the program, we will no longer focus on the program at all. We will focus on 4 essential things on which we will agree together: the basic skills that need to be acquired, the big ideas that must be mastered and well understood, the content of what students need to know, and the competencies of the curriculum. This is what we want students to achieve. Based on these 4 main parts, there is a co-construction effort between the ministry and the teachers to agree on what needs to be done. And the most extraordinary part of this arrangement is that not only do they agree on the assessment, not only do they agree on what needs to be done, but then the ministry asks the schools to figure out how to implement it, giving them complete freedom to do so, because since it's new, they don't know how to do it. And it's up to them to help one another see how, over 10 years, they will transition from one to the other. This is an example of systemic transformation that starts from an idea that is both very simple and very powerful. If we work in collaboration with the institution and the people on the ground, we can move things forward in the right direction and in a coordinated manner. And the last example I really wanted to give you is to go back to those poor little Singaporeans who were extremely stressed out 10 years ago. Singapore has a very unique system. In their systemic analyses, they have indeed actually programmed the evolution of the system. So every approximately 5 years, they undergo a thorough structural reform based on the extensive research conducted at their institution and around the world. When they saw how much their system was leading to significantly too much stress, especially among young children, they revised their approach, and since 2019 they have implemented a reform that is ongoing and evolving today. Now, young Singaporeans are no longer competing against each other. There are no grades until the age of 8. They focus on their progress and develop their ability to reflect on their capacity to build their own knowledge. They learn how to learn and to become lifelong learners. The curriculum is centred on the child's well-being and living together, rather than on hyper-competitiveness. So this is once again a radical paradigm shift. And what is interesting in this example is that it is built into the system. The system repositions itself every 5 years by asking what to change in relation to what we are doing. And if we need to change it because research and the field tell us the same thing, then we get ready to do it. This is a quite remarkable example of reform. As a side note, I actually have a friend who worked on this reform, and he said that one of their sources of inspiration was our preschools. When they came on a learning expedition to France and saw how our preschools operated, where there were no grades and no competition, they thought it interesting. This was one of the elements contributing to changing their system. This means that we can all learn from each other. And this is somewhat the conclusion I would like to reach now. Between living together, transforming the world, and becoming a better person, if we want to build a sustainable and desirable future, we have seen that we must undertake radical reforms, urgent radical reforms of what we learn and the ways we learn. It's about the content, the skills, and the methods. But for that, and in light of what we have just seen, which I enjoyed sharing with you, and I hope you agree, the best way to accelerate this type of transformation is still to learn from each other, because a lot is happening and there are already countries that are doing it, having this logic of learning from each other. So what we have implemented through the Learning Planet Alliance is exactly that. It's about saying ultimately all the organisations that are interested in this type of thing, and today we have nearly 250 partners, but it increases every year. We can find ways to share our experiences, to see what we can do together, to see what we can learn from each other. And one of the ways we do this and keep this movement alive, creating these learning spaces to develop collaborations, is by organising every year in the third week of January a learning festival, a Learning Planet Festival, which allows everyone to come and listen. It is open and free. It is now worldwide. There are more than 500 sessions for the coming year, and it increases each and every single year. It allows us to go see, gather information, get inspired, see what is being done as we learn from each other, from those who are successful, in order to build solutions that will work for us. And with that, you are welcome to the next edition, and see you soon.